Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unit Masters Cohort 5. We're in week 5, actually, of our journey together. We have for this topic, this week, the topic of going to understand stakeholder capitalism, or actually the economic system from a broader point of view. So for this week, we have speakers who are not from the blockchain field, but actually are representing bodies of work that we at Unit find very, very important for the development of economy and society. And today with us, we have Professor Manfred Kets de Vries. He's a very wonderful person in many different regards. He's actually one of the best listeners I have ever experienced in my life. An executive coach, has created different leadership initiatives and centers across the globe, one of them at INSEAD Business School in France. That's how I got to know him. And he's written many, many, many different books. Actually, so many I couldn't even count them using my hands. And the interesting thing is, he's currently writing 3 books. But
No.
Manfred,
You're confused. I mean,
no?
I think I've written something like 50, more than 50 books. But
Yeah.
because the pandemic, I have been right. Pandemic, I realized how much time I wasted on standing in lines at airports. So I basically, the pandemic at the positive side is I've written 7 books.
7 books, but I thought last time we spoke you were writing 3 at the same time.
No, the 3, they're the publication process, which is a pain in the neck. I mean, writing is one thing which I like, but then you have the copy editing process, and it is, by the time I'm blind.
Okay, that's good. Let's go back to the setting of having a blank canvas in front of us. You've actually almost lived for 4 times 20 as being 4 seasons. Would you want to share with us a little bit about your life story? What happened actually? Let's start with spring, maybe in the spring season of your life, and then the summer, the fall. I don't know, Manfred. That's maybe helpful for us to also get to know your story a little bit.
Actually, interestingly enough, I had in the spring, I was interviewed by the Financial Times, and they have this once a week. There is an interview on Saturday, lunch with the Financial Times, which was difficult because it became a virtual lunch. And usually I know how to deal with journalists, but this one had done his homework very carefully. So he was unmovable in many ways. And basically he was, he focused on 2 things of me, and not really on my work, because my work has to do with, I guess I'm the dinosaur of INSEAD, and I'm trying to create reflective leaders. I mean, it's, when you look at the world around you, it is, there's too much toxic. I used to be when you call the pathologist of organizations, and I wrote terrible books about struggling with the demon, organizations on the couch and whatever. And when I was asked to become the director of the Global Leadership Centre, I had to shift. I had to take people who are competent and turn it a little bit around and see how can better. You didn't introduce me quite well, because actually I might be somewhat of an executive coach, but everybody in the kitchen sink calls himself at the moment a coach, which is one way of one way of avoiding saying I do nothing, or whatever it might be. And so it's like psychology used to be in the 20s, the 1920s, when sort of Wild West. I'm actually a psychoanalyst, and I have 2 hats. One I always call I combine the dismal science, which was Keynes' description of being an economist, which is originally I'm an economist, with the impossible profession, which is Freud's description of being a psychoanalyst. And coming back to what I've seen in my life as my agenda, which probably has to do with I was born during the war, the Second World War, and when you had quite terrible leaders. You still have terrible leaders, but of course the famous one was of course Hitler, and that has very much. And when you look at the interview with the Financial Times, that's the writer, the associate editor, very much focused on that, how it influenced me in trying to create better leaders. And I actually have been starting on a micro level, looking at leaders of organizations, but I guess the one I've not really done much with is political leaders. And so I'm trying to create, I was all my life trying to get best places to work. And if you think about one of the latest Gallup polls about engagement, 85% of people worldwide don't feel engaged. So I guess I've been at INSEAD, I've been not only at INSEAD, I've been the advocate of team coaching to create better, because it's always to me surprising how organizations spend millions of hundreds of millions of dollars on IT systems and other systems, but the top team is not well together. And if the top team doesn't have a focus, I actually had a board meeting this morning, and the two key people there are not focused. And that, fish start to smell from the head. And so I think give me a somewhat neurotic team, not psychotic team, and I make something out of it. So I've introduced this kind of methodology in many places in the world. I also started a consulting firm called, very narcissistically, by the way, called the Kets de Vries Institute. And although I'm very detached from it, it's in a way a family business, since my daughter is in charge of it as the managing partner. And but basically trying to get better places to work. And to me, always the acid test of good places to work is if you would like your friends and family members to be there. I have actually an anecdote about that. I remember once going to Denmark, I flew to Copenhagen, and I was picked up by a taxi to go to a company. And said, you're going to Buxwaard. You're going to, this is a company called Novo Nordisk, who is the insulin business. And said, said, my father worked there, my brother works there. I would love to work there. So for half an hour, I listened to this taxi driver telling me what a great company it was. And that's very rare, because that's really the acid test. Friends and family members, you like them to work there. So I've been trying to, and also I try to help executives to have a more balanced lifestyle. I'm the dinosaur of INSEAD. And I guess now, one of the important, I've been running a seminar I taught first the MBAs. I never taught you, but I stopped doing that after a while. But now I teach gray-haired gentlemen and also more and more women, which is quite an effort, because I've taken that CEO recycling seminar, I call it sometimes, 21 people. And this year, last year now, was the first time in 30 years, this program has been on 30 years. And normally executives, MBAs and things like that, since you are, they use case studies. I've written probably more than 100 case studies and used lots of case studies. The MBA program, lots of case studies. I've written many of them. But in this class, which makes it actually exciting, I don't know what's going to happen, because the people in the class are the case studies. They're sitting there. And what I try to do, since the fairly long program, it runs over a year, is I try to create tipping points. And of course, one thing, they come from many different reasons. And when in the first class, I asked them, what crazy fantasy do you have to be here? It's quite a commitment. It's a 4-week commitment over a year. It's quite considerable, given they are busy people. And they tell me they want to become a better leader. They have a merger going on, so they want to be better in integrating the two cultures and all different things. But the real reasons, probably is a reason under the reason. And we all look for meaning. And one of my last books, which just came out, which is called Vadis, not very original. It's basically, there was actually a Nobel Prize winner in Poland who wrote the book Vadis, became a movie. But of course, it's the quotation of when St. Peter was trying to escape Rome because he was afraid he would be crucified, and he met, probably hallucinated, whatever, Jesus, and said, where are you going? And basically Jesus shamed him to go back, and of course he got crucified. But that's another story. But Quo Vadis really has to do, they all look for meaning. That's really the main major thing. With all the other things, and I'm, the things you do at the moment, I'm very much out of it. But I wrote recently a book which, I wrote a book before, actually. It's called Sex, Money, Happiness, and Death. Those are the themes people talk about when you go. But the real thing has to do with meaning. And meaning to me, has to do with that you have a purpose. Purpose is not the same as meaning. It's future-oriented. What do you want to do? What is your purpose in life? What do you want to accomplish? Like what you want to accomplish. What do you want to accomplish? What's your sense of purpose? Yep.
In the future.
Yeah, but
I think my purpose and my meaning are the same, because my purpose is to be in the present moment, like to always in every moment
No.
be in the present moment.
You have a bigger, yeah, it's more complicated. That don't escape, and you shouldn't escape there. Now let me try to. I mean, I don't like models, although we all have models in the mind because we feel very helpless, and so we try to organize our mind a little bit. And of course, as a psychoanalyst, I have somewhat of a psychodynamic, systemic orientation. Although I use anything that works. I mean, from evolutionary psychology to paradoxical intervention, whatever it might be. But meaning is based on, I think, conceptually, on 5 items. One is purpose, which is future-oriented. Then also, what are you really good at? You know, when you have a Mozart, who's an extreme example, of course. I mean, he had natural talent, you know, what is talent in music. Some people are good with their body, they can be good athletes, and so you can go on. And what gives you the sense of competence also gives you a sense of flow. I remember once I was in Norway, and I was salmon fishing, I was fly fishing, and I got so excited because the salmon was there and I was here, and it's always light. I kept on fishing, and my family thought I had died, you know, I drowned or whatever. But I was in the flow, and so you have moments where you lose a sense of time, you're full of it, and that's when you do. It's like I can sometimes do, you know, for boys, very particularly football games and things like that, and really trying to win. So that's one thing. Then you. And that has been one of my achievements, I think, at INSEAD. When I came there was no coaching. And slowly everybody got coaching except the MBAs, because there were too many of them and it's expensive. It's not mass production. And I always felt the 2 major choices. MBAs are stuck with 2 major choices, which has to do with you have an element of ownership. You can call it sense of control over your life, which has to do with the choice of partner. No, and we don't do a good job there. As you know, 50% of the relationships fail. And in the meantime, by the way, I get them when the messes have been made, while the MBA still have a chance to make some better choices. And the other one has to do with career, what you feel, what fit you. And many people come also to MBA programs. They have tried something that didn't work out, so they give it another try, and so they go to a moratorium and go to the MBA program. So that's another one. Then, of course, the critical factor in life is, and there is this famous longitudinal study from Harvard, which started in 1938, then the life study, which started with sophomores at Harvard, which is what was, and still a few people are alive in the study, is sense of belonging. And also, if you feel a sense of belonging, if you feel close to family and friends, if you have a network of people, you live longer. It's good for your mental health. And then finally, and that's where you are actually in, which sometimes when I talk to you, it's transcendence, which is that, you know, of course we have our selfish motives, but giving to others is good for you. The altruistic motive might be also, you know, this part of our probably evolutionary makeup. Altruism is giving is better than taking, even though it looks like the opposite. And so when you look at the sectors, sense of belonging, sense of purpose, sense of control, sense of competence, and sense of transcendence, that together makes meaning. Now, you know, there's sometimes a confusion between meaning and happiness. You know, the happiness, and I think we talk about, Plato talks about you know, the kind of the short-term happiness and the long-term happiness. And happiness is actually quite, and coming back to my students, I'm a little bit rambling, but they're looking for meaning, and they're looking to feel happier in their skin, which they're not. And particularly at midlife, what I very often see is that for them, their children have been moving out of the house. If you have children in the house, you can at least have purpose, you know, some purpose. I want the children to be mature, you know, achieving, happy individuals. But then they leave. And so some children rise to the occasion and stay at home as a sick child, so they can still continue. But without the children, they lose it. And so what I see very often is that coming back to this element, we said the choice, that what might be good at 20 might be good at 40. And couples develop at different speed. And suddenly they realize they are basically leading parallel lives. And how to do something about it, which I wrote actually a little article about the triumph of hope over experience. I think I sent it to you. Didn't you get it? Yeah. About I give 10 points of advice of good couple relationship, because it was basically stimulated by my class, because 7 out of the 21 didn't do very well in their relationship. And I don't want, so what I'm trying to say, coming back to my work, when I work with executives, of course, today I was at the board meeting and we talk about succession and how a particular entity has to be run and things like that. But there are underneath all different layers, which you also take in consideration. And basically, it has to do with feeling good in your skin, dealing with I think Jung talks about the shadow side of you, and to become more authentic. And I think partially that's what you have been striving when I listen to you, and that's the reason we are talking, because I found it rather endearing at such a young age comparatively, that you because most people start to get more into that when they're older, when they have a lot of setbacks. And of course you can have setbacks very early in life too, but when no gain without pain. So people start to think about, is this the life I want to lead? I was in that respect a little bit influenced by one of my teachers at Harvard, which was a man called Erik Erikson, who talked about the life cycle. And I'm at the end of my life cycle. And he looked at it in polarities, which has to do with, you have actually, he was the first one who talked about the adult life cycles. Later on, some child psychologists and some developmental psychologists have picked it up, like Keegan and Kaplan. But so I'm at a stage of integrity versus despair. And you might recall the song of Edith Piaf, Je ne regrette rien, I don't regret anything. I don't know. Probably regret. Anyhow, I've been rumbling now. I should shut up. You said I'm a good listener. You said I'm a good listener. So much for my listening. But you did not a great job in introducing me, so I felt that I should say something about what I do. All right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I still need to learn a little bit. No, basically, I actually think it's one of the reasons why society is at such a difficult time right now, because people think, that's what I observe, that giving is better than taking, because it's just a mathematical formula, right? If everybody prefers to give and nobody takes, then nobody can be happy. So basically, I actually find a lot of grace in learning how to take, because thereby you give others an opportunity to give, right? Sometimes it's just, people want to give, but nobody allows them to contribute in a way they find meaningful. And that's kind of, a bit frustrating to be put in that position sometimes. I was wondering, Manfred, you told about, and somebody from the audience asked that you spoke about these different meanings, situations of meaning. Would you want to share, along your journey, how did you discover meaning for yourself and whether that changed along the way?
Now I have to, we live longer, so more and more people have portfolio careers. I deal with that all the time. That people have, typical comment would be in my class. I've been the president of this bank for so many years now. What's next? What's next? What I can do next? I know how to do that, and so how can I reinvent myself? And I've been living. Fortunately, I've had a long life. My father actually had too long a life. I think he died at the age of 101, which is, I think, is too long, because because of physical deterioration, many things you cannot do anymore. But so I've been trying to do different things. From first maybe try to be an academic, and you have to go to certain hoops to write papers and things like that. But the fortunate thing is that I'm in the teaching profession, and so it's not. I think about many executives I know who had been running a company, then they retire. You have onboarding, but offboarding, you're not very good in that. And so what they usually do is they try to do this in a few boards, but it's not the same. It's not the same. I'm on a board. I'm on some boards, but it's not the same. I've never been. It's true. I'm not completely true. I run something at INSEAD for a while, but not. It's not similar. And then they get depressed. And so the question is, how to diversify your interest. I mean, many of the some of the executives, unless you are an entrepreneur, so it's, you know, you have more control, but otherwise you have to, you're forced to retire. So then a few boards, and then you can play golf. You know, I'm here in the south of France. I mean, there are lots of people retired, and what they do, they drink, play golf, and have some dinner parties, but it's not necessarily always that stimulating, to be very frank. And so, being in the teaching profession, I meet people like you who asked funny questions, and it made me think. And at the moment, because I don't travel, I do a lot of Zoom conferences, and people ask questions. And the questions have always been the questions of my students. And you look at, I just wrote a book which I sent to you. I think it's just Leading Wisely. You probably didn't read it, but
You sent it 2 days ago. How should I read it?
it's a small book. It's a small book, but I was trying to help you a little bit to ask certain questions. But Leading Wisely is really a book based on the questions asked by my students, and very often I cannot answer the questions, but they make me think, and so I sit on it, and you know, the way whatever creative process there is, it's not necessarily sitting here behind my desk and my computer. It's walking around, walking in the garden, swimming, feeding the birds, or whatever I might be doing. That suddenly it pops up, some idea pops up. I mean, of course, you have the famous 3 Bs of creativity: the bed, the bath, and the bus. And of course, with our iPhones and whatever it might be, we continuously interrupted. But in the past, those were offer some quiet moments. And because, you know, your brain keeps on working even when you sleep, because you have your dreams. When your brain doesn't work, you're dead. So I've become quite good in managing my biorhythm. I know when I can be most productive, and I also know when I have to stop. Because like at this board meeting, we were hammering on an issue this morning. It was a 5-hour board meeting. And I mean, and we were not going anywhere. I said, time out, let's do something else for a moment. This was on virtual, unfortunately. But that's what the way, and slowly got some closure, because there was too much divergent thinking.
What about wisdom, Manfred? What for you is wisdom?
No, I mean, if you read the book, which I didn't, and the book is not out yet, well, probably I don't know, yeah. I'm in the strange position that I'm at the same time doing the copy editing process of 3 books at the same time. It becomes very confusing. I mean, one thing of wisdom has to do with the element of picking your battles. You know, you're being smart in picking your fights. And you have to ask yourself, is it worth my energy? Would it make a difference in a week, in a month, in a year? Would I really look back at certain things? I had one client who has been fighting with his brother for 14 years. I mean, maybe that's the way he likes to live, but is this the way to go about life? Also, this very important factor has to do with forgiveness. You know, if you don't forgive, you poison yourself, and you don't have to forget, you know, things like that. But there's also, I think I started that book with trying to make a distinction between intelligence, knowledge, and wisdom. But one important thing is what's called the golden rule. It's a very old rule. How do you treat people when nobody is looking? People you don't know, the way you want to be treated. To be everybody's a human being, and it's a very simple rule, and it's a very old rule. But as opposed to go to the lex talionis and becoming very angry and eye for an eye and things like that. So forgiveness is part of it. So, and also the element of, what makes people happy? What is happiness? And so this book, actually, I think I have eight points I make there, plus some kind of introduction about trying to, the interesting thing is, and that's not very original, Yip. When I was your age, I knew everything. Fantastic. I remember I felt I had it all under control. The older I am, the less I know.
What are
I'm much.
things you really want to discover right now? What have you
What?
realized that you know least of?
No, I mean, probably, as I said, I have done a lot of things, worked with a lot of people, but I make one of the statements people quote me on is sometimes everybody is normal until you know them better, and it's very hard to really let's think about case studies which we use in MBA programs. Uh, Most of them are extremely superficial because in the case writing process, the deal is that the person about is the person, the cases or the company, they have to sign off in it. So you self-center. So there's so many layers underneath. Now, why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are the real reasons? When you feel at your best? What about your lower moments and things like that? What were some events, situations in your life which make you the person you are? Now, if you would make a documentary about your life, what are the moments you would capture to really illustrate what you're all about? Those are some of the questions we struggle with, and then coming back to why are we here, and can we make a difference? I have here a quotation which I always like. Is by a woman I admired, Margaret Mead. She was a famous anthropologist. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And when I think about you, I always have an association of Margaret Mead's quotation.
Thank you. I think that's what we're here for. Everybody here who's here at this course, trying to find ways to contribute to a different world, or to the next evolution of what we're seeing. Manfred,
And lots
what?
of people here. I think I see that. I suddenly see it. Not, I mean, looking at you, not at the side here.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can turn me off and have a look at everybody else, and everybody else who's here and feels comfortable.
no,
You
no,
can
no, no.
turn on your camera.
I'm talking about the questions. The Peter Principle. And here is one of the Peter Principles. A long time ago, that anybody talked about the Peter Principle. And hi, Dr. Manfred. Nobody calls me Dr. Manfred, but what the hell? You're only in Germany, I think, in Austria. They have Professor, Doctor, or something like that. Just write your website and pressing to apply psychology in big organizations on a clinical environment, which I'm more familiar to. So I have any misunderstand. Is there similarity between the personality or the MBTI? Yeah, there's a difference. I mean, the personality audit is basically based on I mean, it's not very interesting to most people, but when I was the head of the Global Leadership Centre at INSEAD out of a defensive proposition, and I'm a lousy statistician. If one course I ever failed in my life was statistics, but I found the best psychometrician in France. And so he teamed up and developed a number of 360 tests. And one was the personality audit, which has a mix. It's basically I was influenced by the Big Five test and the MBTI. By the way, MBTI is. I find it totally useless. I find it. I mean, it's not correct. I mean, my
It's a
wife disagrees.
psychology test.
No, no,
Just
no,
for
no.
those who do not come from the
No,
field,
but
they don't
basically,
know what it is.
let me give my nasty comment about MBTI. It was developed by two American housewives who read something about Jung, and then became masters in marketing. And I think it's a fantastic thing that everybody talks, management talks about MBTI. Unfortunately, nobody in psychiatry ever talks about MBTI. That might be an indication. But what it does, according to my wife, it helps. It's the beginning of a discussion. The personality audit is based on something more substantial, which is the Big Five, which I think is one of the better theories on characterizing people, and also a Giessen test is the couple test, because when people come to my class, they tell me that they're God's gift to humankind. So many of them are very narcissistic, and I believe them. I'm naive. What the hell? I mean, they tell me so, but I become very cynical about self-assessment. And so I have been advocate of 360. I mean, if I always say, when one person tells you have ears like a donkey, ignore it. But if two people tell you so, get yourself a saddle. So it may be more valuable. And so I want information from people in the company and inside and outside in the company and also their life. And the Giessen test was a couple test. So the Gießen test, what happened in the personality audit, I want feedback from friends and family members and children and things like that, how they look at pa or ma. And it's quite interesting. And also there's some written comments. So you get some better sense of what the person is all about, because I don't have much time. And particularly when I was the director, my coaches, since coaching is expensive, coaching is usually 1 or 2 days in small groups. And INSEAD, doesn't want to spend too much money on it. So I want the coaches to have a flying start. And the best way to do it is I usually myself, I use the Global Executive Leadership Mirror, which is, and the more the merrier. It's a 360 test talking about managing self, managing the teams, managing the organization, and then managing the external world. You have all different factors in it. It's a rather complicated test. You can look it up. It was originally called the Global Executive Leadership Inventory, but after 10 years of complaints by my coaches and users, I decided to be nice and integrate all their comments. So it became the Global Executive Leadership Mirror. And so I used the Global Executive Leadership Mirror and the personality audit to get a quickie balanced view of the person, because I've discovered, as I said earlier, that people tell me they God's gift to humankind, and then I go to the organization and discover they're Genghis Khan. But they live in their delusion. So I put quite some pins in people as a result about uh, thinking how great they are given when they give this feedback. So I developed something like 5 360 tests, which
Yeah, Manfred, but in which way, like, what happens actually when all leaders would be good leaders? Would we then still need leadership? Actually, should everybody wake up to leadership? What's your learning over the years? What were misconceptions about leadership, and actually, what is it that people should actually implement?
now many. I mean, the problem is that uh, many lead. I mean, there was, I think, 600 years before Christ, there was a wise man called Thales of Miletus, who was asked what's the most difficult thing in the world. And the most difficult thing in the world, Jip, is know thyself. And so I want, as I said earlier, I want people to be aware of their shadow side. And too many leaders suffer from hubris, not a Greek word. They become full of themselves and self-destruct. And because they're behaving that way, they become extremely destructive to other people. And we have seen it lately, how some leaders behaved. I mean, it was Warren Buffett who said, when the tide goes out, you see you swimming naked. And you think about the president of Brazil or President Trump. I mean, and their behavior. I mean, Trump being a devotee of the dark diet, which is narcissism and psychopathy. Uh, they have cost millions of lives because of their terrible ways of dealing with things. So it is. But basically, I wrote a little article coming back to your question about to hell with charisma. And and when you look at what's happening now, because also of the social media, which has become a weapon of mass destruction, two people seem to be attracted to people who seem to be quite artistic on television shows or whatever it might be, without having the depth. I would make an exception to the leader of Ukraine, who was, of course, playing president and things like that. Now he's become the president, but he seems to be not too bad the way he is acting. And you probably, I would also say leadership is a team sport, so it probably also has good advisors. In the case of Trump, he was surrounded by, sycophants all the time, because they knew when you disagreed with him, his venom, was endless. I mean, he had to
Yeah.
be, he needed his daily doses of "you're the greatest."
if if we have in our surroundings, like if we observe these kinds of patterns that are destructive to the comments, what is a good way to address that? Because I imagine if I'm stuck with Donald Trump in the elevator and I tell him, You're such, not a nice person," I don't think I will get anywhere. What is a good way to have an impact without just, I don't know, blocking everything.
And yep, I have some terrible news for you. There's something called the hair test. A man called Hare, Hare. And if you pass the test, that you pass the hair test, the best thing you can do to lock yourself up and throw the key away. It's meaning, you know, a person like Trump, it's hopeless to do anything. I mean, maybe if he has some major, he's always been protected by his father in the past, major setbacks. But even that, because of psychopaths, and there's a number of theories about it, that might be something wrong with the amygdala, their whole emotional system, it's genetic and things like that. But yes, you know, their emotional processes are different from other people. So they don't, you know, they might kill you and don't feel any guilt about it. They feel it's just the right thing to do. They have to win, whatever it might be. So some people, I mean, you should not waste your energy. Stay away from it. I mean, if you want to have happiness, one of the things in my book on wisdom, now also stay away from toxic people. You know, when you know that certain people all the time can give you stress, better to, and sometimes you cannot help it, maybe your family members, you cannot choose them, but otherwise stay away from it. No, I mean,
What do you do
but
in
many
such a
people,
situation with a family member when you cannot run away from the situation? What is, from your practice, actually a good way to be with the situation and be still happy or content with the within the
let,
situation?
let, let me reframe it. I had many years ago a woman in my class who was the chairman of the board, and as a chairperson of the board, and she liked to talk, and people listened. Of course, she was used to that. So, and you know, I try to be fair in class, that everybody has enough the same airtime. So when she put her hand in the air, I knew that everyone was in for trouble, because she would go on and on and on and on. And I had an internal voice said to me, "My God, Maria is not her name. Maria, please shut up, shut up." But I was I tried to control myself, so I said nothing. I let it be. So 2.5 months later, the second module, and there was Maria again, not a peep. After 2 days, I got very worried. You know, something is wrong. So I took her aside and said, "Maria, what's going on?" And she said, "You know, at dinner time, a number of dinners we had in the previous module, my colleagues, the other narcissists, told me that I talk too much and should learn how to listen. And I practiced that over the 2.5 months, and I learned a lot. So I didn't do anything. It's the narcissist took care of the narcissist. That can sometimes work, because it's very hard to, and usually when you talk about people with narcissistic personalities, which you find quite a bit among leaders, uh, it only starts to, when, you know, actually this was a surgeon, Sir William Osler, who said, the best thing that happened to a person is a mild coronary at mid-age. Meaning when you are lying in the hospital with tubes coming out of you, you are forced to reflect on your life. And of course, if you're a male and your wife runs away, your children hate you, and your company is not doing too well, and you have some, you know, psychosomatic problems, maybe you have enough pain that you say, maybe I should do something about myself. But otherwise, they may continue to operate in their narcissistic bubble. So they need to be coming back. Unfortunately, we are a very change-resistant species. We don't like change, and we have our habits, which we're very malleable when you're young, but when you are in midlife, it's much more difficult. You can change, but you know it takes more effort, and it takes a lot of practice. That's the reason change seems to be sometimes a lot of a tedious process. You have to try to practice new ways of doing things. I give one client who runs a very large company, and I give him every session I have with him, I give him homework. That's my, I give him homework, and he is actually very good in it. He tries to practice it. And also doing other things like advising people to, coming back to self-reflection, to write a diary. You know, when you write about things, it touches different parts of the brain. And it's also a good way if you have traumatic experiences to overcome it. But to write, to make an effort every day or maybe a few times a week, to write something down, what was important to you, what gave me energy, like an energy barometer, what took energy away, is a very good way of getting more insight about yourself and managing yourself better. I'm not being done very well with the credit. Myers-Briggs is still there. I hated Myers-Briggs. I never used it because I think, as I said, since I've been quite trained in psychiatry, no psychiatrist will touch it. But my wife likes it because it's a beginning. I said at the beginning of the discussion, what's so what's other things here? The Mystic of Leadership. The Mystique. I wrote that. Yeah, it's one of my simple. I like the book. It's one of the book I like. Hello from Moscow. I once gave a talk in Moscow. I never forget it. For 20,000 people in the Moscow stadium. I've never done that live. You know, not. I did it also on Zoom. It's very different, but live, it's you cannot see anybody anymore. That's the problem. What defines true leadership? You know, it's an interesting question. Like there is no baby, I always say, where there's no baby without a mother, there's no leader without a context. So if you're the managing partner on McKinsey, which I had one as my student, it needs a different style of leadership when you're running a steel mill in the Caucasus. So you have to adjust it. I mean, I can talk about gentle leadership and servant leadership. And then I have one of my ex-students and friend now who runs a shipping company and deals with captains of ships. You know, you have to have a little bit of a different style when you are a captain of a ship, and how do you deal with those captains. So you have to adjust. And as I said before, I get very irritated when there's always this glorious leader at the top. That it's like he or she does it all alone. No, it's a team. It's a teamwork. So I'm a great believer in creating well-functioning teams which are complementary. Actually, I developed a 360 questionnaire called the Leadership Archetype Questionnaire, in which I try to describe the different roles people play in organizations, from being a communicator, being a coach, being a strategist, being a deal maker, being an entrepreneur, etc., and being also what I call a transactor, meaning the train has to be run on time. And as a leader in an organization, you have to figure out, does my team have the right the qualities, the skills to make it work? I remember once was actually in Moscow. I was doing something there, and everybody was there, was strategist or deal maker. But in the meantime, the company was growing very fast, and there was nobody coaching the people to develop the people. And I think the questionnaire helped it to focus on that particular item that they really decided. They hired at the time, I think, somebody from Boston Consulting Group to be their HR person. So what's here? I mean, and my time is running out, I think. That's what are your struggles in
Still
life?
have
Seems to
15
reduce
minutes.
anxiety. Oh, I thought it was 45 minutes, you said.
Is it okay
I'm
to have
fine. I
15
mean,
minutes?
I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to have a swim afterwards and feed a wild boar. I have some wild boar in the garden.
You didn't shoot it.
We all have.
Lucky wild boar.
I'm not so fond of wild boar meat. Maybe some people are, but it's not the greatest. But it's bio meat, huh? Yeah, so you can talk. It's for healthy meat. I'm supposed
It
to
might
buy.
be Iberico version. What are most common challenges, Manfred, that teams encounter?
There's so many. Actually, if people are really interested, because time is ticking, I had to explain when I was the director at INSEAD of this Global Leadership Centre, how I coach. Now, I always told my coaches, and I had a big team at the time, you should use what feels natural to you. I don't want to put them into a cookie cutter. But to explain what I do is difficult, because experiential things are difficult to explain. So I wrote a script of a real story, and I hired 4 actors because I couldn't. In reality, I couldn't film people. They don't allow. I mean, like the board meeting I had this morning, I couldn't say this, I'm filming you, because I want to use it for teaching purposes. So I had hired the actors, I wrote a script, and you can see it on, I think, and then somebody, not me, put it online. I think it's on YouTube, about intervention. And an example of, what of the, now it can be that you have a CEO, in the case of the example, the CEO is very micromanaging. Then you have another one, there is a chief knowledge officer who's all over the place. And basically, people don't know why people do what they do. When I started the kind of team, trying to practice with team coaching, the 2 companies which were the guinea pigs were McKinsey and which has been adopting much of the way I do it, which I realized later. And it also has been Goldman Sachs. And in the beginning, I would give them my famous questionnaires, like the Global Executive Leadership Mirror and things like that. But it's boring. I said, you look at it, they're not stupid. They look at it and say, my God, I'm not good in this, I'm not good in that. So I said, tell your story. That's much more exciting. Now, you come from Cyprus. How do somebody from Cyprus ends up as a partner, in New York? What did you do? And so that becomes more interesting. And then, of course, the problem is when people look at the feedback, it takes around 6, 7 positive comments to deal with the negative comments. People are not perfect. So I try to create a playful atmosphere, and you can see it a little bit in that video clip, in which I do a little bit of the Bloomsbury. It was a group in England of literary people who would play games. Now imagine you are a vegetable, Yip. What vegetable would you pick? It would be a tomato, an asparagus, a cucumber. What would you be?
Strawberry.
Strawberry. Now I don't use the vegetables, I use the animal. So imagine you're an animal. What animal would you be?
A bird.
A bird. What kind of bird?
A phoenix.
Phoenix. That's interesting. I was reading about the phoenix this morning because of the latest book I'm working on. But I had once a person in South Africa, and I was not. South Africans are very good in picking animals. He said, "You remind me." There's one person of the executive team. It was a bank. You remind me of a fiscal shrike. Have you ever heard of a fiscal shrike? No, I had never heard of it either. Now, of course, I picked it up. And fiscal shrike is a very nice little bird on this size or so. And this bird picks up lizards and other little smaller birds and hangs them on thorns to flap. That attracts the female of the species. It's not a nice bird. So when one member of the executive team tells the other member, you remind me of a fiscal shrike, you might make some, but it's a way of starting to play. People say you're a leopard.
That's a beautiful way to think about how can we find playful ways to engage with each other in difficult settings, right? We can come back to our self-chosen, I don't know, symbols and then remind each other, oops, maybe we're a bit off track compared to what we actually wanted to portray or display without attacking each other. There was another question
By the
from
way,
Thomas.
I asked them also always in that context, as a friend, what would you tell Yip to become even more effective? It's a very important question. Because they got their feedback, not the MBTI. They got their feedback, and some of them got a major narcissistic injury. Now they feel, my God, I'm terrible. I have no emotional intelligence. I mean, basically, I'm terrible in coaching. I'm terrible in this, and so one needs to. And so what people start to realize where it comes from, and they make contracts with each other. We have a person with the chief knowledge officer in that particular video clip. Now, basically, what came out of it that some people will never be good at something, and so you have to basically complement it. But you don't. He had to realize that he needed minor hygienic factors in the organization. Somebody sends an email, please respond. Not let it hang for a long time. If somebody calls you, please respond. And so one way of dealing with that, because he was all over the place, was having an assistant who would be deceived and taking care of all those things. Very simple things. So people start to realize we have a fantasy very often that we all think alike. We don't. And so in that particular discussion, the playfulness of one is a buffalo, one is a leopard, one is a bird, whatever, they're not a fiscal shrike, whatever it might be. People start to realize the different perspective, and they start to better understand each other. And they become very bonded because of this exercise, because they know something about the background. Like the question I asked earlier, can you say something, a significant event situation that changed your life dramatically? And when people start to talk, it's a very good question, to start to think or to tell something about yourself. And so you become more a person, because McKinsey and Goldman Sachs were networking organizations before the pandemic. So in particular McKinsey, they picked up a team, one person from Singapore, one person from Moscow, one person from Chicago. They had to work together very quickly. And when you build this kind of network, it is easier. You know each other. You can ask questions.
Yes, I should have asked you that question right in the beginning without rambling 5 minutes about random stuff, and we would have gotten a bit, deeper faster. So, you know,
Hmm.
having been to McKinsey and undergoing several 360 degrees, actually my realization was it's actually not very helpful. First, we have to teach, I guess, people how to communicate in constructive ways before we let them give feedback to other poor young consultants with a lot of confidence issues, because you destroy people's
There's a question actually
capabilities. It's
by
unskillful feedback.
this Ion. I think I made it not pronounce the name well, but he talks about evolution of leadership styles. I think find it a very interesting question. That has been asked me many times from journalists. It's a change. Of course, there are some changes, but many basic of leadership. I would say in the past, I would say, many of the leadership principles of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, and Shaka Zulu are still appropriate. So I wrote a book on Alexander the Great after I made this flippant remark. I wrote a book on Shaka Zulu, which is the big Zulu leader who united Southern Africa. I never wrote on Genghis Khan because there's only oral history. So I felt it was not. Also, Shaka Zulu was very difficult. They're all very difficult, but particularly Genghis Khan I found very difficult. But a lot of the principles of leadership when you talk about leadership lessons of those people from time past, we still use many of those, which has to, as I said earlier, to set the example, to empower people, and also to be able, for example, you are a general. You have a big fight the next day. You have three captains or three colonels, but you have figured them out a little bit. You have a sense who they are. One is a micromanager. So he said, listen, you give me a detailed battle plan. He said, it's going to be tough, but here's a detailed battle plan. The other one is an entrepreneurial type. So you tell him, do what you think is right. Give him a lot of freedom because that's what he needs. Otherwise, and the third one is counter-dependent. You say to him, no, you're going to lose. You're not going to make it. And he gets so angry eventually, you're going to show the bastard. So you have to really figure, again, coming back that people don't think alike. And I wrote once a book called The Hedgehogs, the Hedgehog, whatever, something with the Hedgehog. I mean, I've written too many books. It's here, let me see. So it's the Hedgehog effect, yeah, that's I call that. And basically, in that respect, I'm a student of Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer has talked about the two hedgehogs in the winter. Now, Yip is what kind of hedgehog are you? So you're in the winter, it's cold, you want to get warm, you want to get closer, but as a hedgehog, how close can you get? Because you just sting each other. So some people, and so according to child development studies, there's three kinds, sometimes people say four, three kinds of hedgehogs. One is the hedgehog who is quite secure. They get close, they feel it's okay. It's okay. Secure hedgehogs. And by the way, this is the basic matrix of relationships. And it will very much determine your partner choice and the way you deal with when you are in charge other people. So it's a very important concept actually. So there's three ways usually the hedgehogs behave. One is the secure one, which is around 50% of the population. And then you have the anxious one. Basically when they were growing up, they never knew, is mother going to be there and father going to be there? It might be there, but it's anxious. They become very clingy. And then you have the avoidant ones. They have given up. So can you imagine when you have an avoidant, they're very detached. So you have a couple, a moment of insanity, and talk about now couple, not in business relationship, moment of insanity have come together. Now the one partner wants to get closer. The man, in this case, maybe the man wants to get closer, while the woman, the closer he gets, the more scared she gets and go distant. So that is not, it can change, you can work at it, but it's difficult. So and it also has to do in business. So you have one people, you have to tell on a regular basis, you do a great job, you do a great job, and do a great job, and you have to tell them, I still love you, I still love you. Other people are low maintenance. They said, let me do my thing. And so you have to figure that out if you want to run organization in a good way. So, and coming back to the question of what evolution of leadership style, I think I try to create reflective leaders, people who have come to grips with their inner demons. And I don't like the word authentic too much, but act more authentically, because there is a difference between falling and jumping. And if you don't want to see the darker side of yourself and do something about it, it will pop up without you knowing it. And it's better that you know when you feel that you get, very often you have a physiological reaction, that you get excited about certain things. Something is, somebody's. I have an executive I know who very quickly gets very edgy when anybody in his team question him, and he has to, so he has a very caring, nice, playful style. But when anyone, what he believes is questioning his authority, he goes in rigid overdrive. And so he's now learning, it takes time, he's now learning not to slash out, but to just take it and think about it and not do anything. When in doubt, don't move. That's, and just think about what is happening to me. And there's time is now over, but there's a concept called transference, which is the most important concept in psychotherapy. But what it really means is that no relationship is a new relationship. All relationships are colored by previous relationships. So if you had a very autocratic father, I have no idea about your father, and you always got into fights with your father, there's a good possibility when you meet someone who reminds you of your father, you go into overdrive. And so you have to become aware of it, because the person you deal with is not your father. And so you say, okay, there we go again. What am I doing? I better be quiet. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to be irritated. This is not my father. It's not my competitive sister. Not that, and this kind of thing. And that's what psychotherapists work with, because you can tell me, you can bounce on your head when you were 5 years old, and the reason you're so crazy. But if you tell me, when I see you acting towards me in a certain ways, that is information in the here and now. Anyhow, I babbled too much. I didn't answer all the questions because I was free associating as part of my particular background. Sorry about that.
Everyone, thank you so much, Manfred, for being here. I overcame some kind of anxiety now that I survived our little fireside chat. I was really nervous, and I'm happy we went through it. Thank you so much for sharing with us about wisdom and leadership.
And I'm sorry that I didn't talk to the different members of the group, because this is a very small group comparatively to in the past, indirectly, because I kept on babbling a little bit. So my apologies about it.
I can learn to be a better moderator next time. All right. Have a good one, everyone. And see you soon. And thank you again, Manfred, for being with us at Unit Masters.
It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.